Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Tanya Pets and Matt Brost, here talking about career exploration video of law enforcement. Now, Tanya, you were a patrol officer in a small town, and you've had 4 part-time police jobs. How did that help you get experience for your full-time job?
It's actually a really interesting story. When I graduated with my 2-year degree, I started applying everywhere. I lived in outstate Minnesota, and so most of the police departments were small town. And so I would just apply at every police department that I could get my hands on an application for. And the one that I got hired at was Adams, Minnesota, and it was an hour from my home. I drove down there, filled out the application, and drove home. And that same day, I got a call back from the chief. And so that started my career in law enforcement. At that time, I worked 4 part-time law enforcement positions. I had 4 different uniforms, 4 different badges, and had 4 different agencies that I had to learn. And it really gave me an opportunity to dabble in every part of law enforcement. From there, I got hired in my hometown. I worked as a full-time police officer in my hometown, and I had a lot of different opportunities and experiences down there. I was the first and only canine handler that the city had. I actually put together a proposal for the department and was selected to work my first canine. And it was overnights. You worked nights, you worked by yourself. Your nearest backup was probably 5-10 miles away, and so it was very different than what I'm doing now. In 2004, I moved up to Maple Grove, and I started my career with the Maple Grove Police Department, and started again at the bottom, working overnights and patrol. And then I had the opportunity to transition into a community policing position where I worked with businesses and apartment buildings. And from there, I transitioned into DARE, where I taught in the schools, taught DARE for a couple of years. And then my current assignment is with the investigations unit, so I've been a detective with the police department here for about 5 years with Maple Grove.
And Matt, you were a patrol officer, you were in the street crimes unit, a SWAT officer, and investigator and school liaison now. What did you experience on the SWAT team?
Well, I'm just going to kind of back up there real quick.
Right.
I just want to kind of tell my story, like kind of how Tanya said. I started out in business before I became a police officer here. And in 2005, I was hired as a patrol officer. And that is what you start out with. When you apply for a job as being a patrol officer or in law enforcement, typically you start out at the patrol level. And a lot of police departments have many different opportunities within the department, and SWAT is one of them. So I kind of had to work my way up to the SWAT team and being a SWAT operator. It wasn't like I got hired and then they said, hey, Matt, join the SWAT team. No, I had to kind of gain some experience and some training to join the SWAT team. So I've been on the SWAT team for 3 years now, going on my 4th year, and basically we're just kind of an extension of the police department that goes through additional training each month in weapons, movements. So we get to gear up, put on the vests, take the cars out. We do training, and then we're also available for any dangerous situations where we might be called out, like a threat to the community, hostage situation, a barricaded armed subject. These are instances where the SWAT team might get activated.
Matt, another question for you. How did you get your first job? You said here it was a lengthy application, interview, and background process. How does the interview and background process go?
Okay, that's a good question, because it is a very lengthy and, I will admit, stressful process. Basically what it starts out with is you apply. And the application packet for some of the departments that I applied for is pretty lengthy. Maple Grove had a very lengthy one, and you actually had to, I remember, write an essay about yourself and like the experiences you've gone through in your life and your educational background and your career experience, etc. So then from there, you get called and you go through an interview process. And I believe I went through a total of 3 different interviews, including the chief's interview. So you go through a preliminary interview with a panel of 4 individuals, which is pretty intense. I mean, I've done other jobs where I've just interviewed one-on-one, but here you're sitting on a panel and you have 4 different people asking you questions, so it's kind of intimidating. I then had to go through a second interview with a panel, and that was an hour and a half. and then went through they put you through a background process where they check like your criminal histories, your driving record, your grades, and currently now Facebook pages, references. So they run a pretty extensive check. Former neighbors, former residences you lived at, they talk to everybody. And then after passing the background, you get an opportunity to sit down with the chief and interview with the chief. If the chief likes it, they can hire you. If they don't, they won't. But I was fortunate enough to get hired, and then from there I had to go through a physical, a medical physical, and then also a pretty lengthy psychological background as well. And all that passed, and fortunately, in 2005, I got hired with Maple Grove, and I've never looked back since. So.
Do you have any tips for people going into the psychiatric tests or any of the strength tests?
No, I like to work out. I like to keep myself physically fit. I would say that in this job, you come across instances probably on a daily basis that can be strenuous, and that being in good physical shape is necessary. As far as the psychological process, you're on your own on that one. There's really no tips I can give you. Just relax and just answer truthful. That's it. So.
Tanya, you said small town job interview, the process was unique. How was that different from a large town like Maple Grove?
Well, my first interview process was much different than what Matt just talked about. It was a very small town. It was a police department of a one-man chief and 3 part-time officers. And so I filled out the application. He called me back. We sat down in his office, just visited back and forth. And by the time I walked out of that hour-long conversation with him, he handed me one of his old uniform shirts, his old badge, and he says, "Here you go, you have the job." And so I didn't have at that time, I didn't have the experience of the background process. I didn't have an FTO process. It was just pretty much, you got to go buy a gun, and if you want a vest, go buy a vest. And it was a very small town. Started out at $8 an hour, and I did what I did because it's part of what you want to be when you grow up, essentially. It's part of being a police officer. And so it wasn't until I came to Maple Grove that I had the same opportunity or the same experience that Matt did. Outstate Minnesota, nowadays they are pretty uniform in the way that they do their hiring process. People go through a background process. They all go through a physical agility or the physical test, the psychological test, and they all go through that now. But 16 years ago, it was a little bit different.
Now we're going through a normal day/week. You both said there's no such thing as a normal week in the law enforcement career. But Tanya, you said the best part is new or unusual calls. What's an unusual call you've gotten?
Oh, there's so many. Every day is different, and that's part of why, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn for Matt, but I think that's part of why most of us get into law enforcement is because there is no normal day. You can be sitting in your car for a 10-hour shift and have 9.5 hours of complete boredom where you're looking for something to keep yourself busy and have a life or death situation within the last 5 minutes of your shift. And so there's no such thing as normal. Even if we've been to a domestic abuse call, every situation is different because the people involved are different. The situation is different, so there's nothing typical. So that's part of the enjoyment of the job for me is to have the constant change, to have the different types of calls, the different interaction with people. As far as not, the downfall of the job is there's a lot of times that you want to help people, and that's part of why we do what we do is to help people, and there's situations where we just can't. There's times that we see things that no one should have to see. And there's times that where no matter how hard we try, we just can't make it better. And so that's probably one of the biggest downfalls for our job.
Then Matt, you're a liaison officer with Maple Grove. What is a normal day like to be a liaison officer?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm currently with the Osseo Senior High School. I've been there in that building for about 1.5 years now. And like Tanya said, every day is different. My primary objective is to be inside of the school and be that resource for the school. And I deal with things from anywhere from harassment, bullying, deal with fights, I deal with chemical issues, whether it be tobacco, drugs, or alcohol, thefts, and like Tanya said, every day is different. So I never go into school saying, okay, this is going to happen today. I mean, I might be walking the halls and then a fight breaks out. And then I have to deal with that. And then that same day, I might have to deal with someone who came to school under the influence of alcohol. And I'll have to deal with that. Meanwhile, someone's stealing phones in the boys' locker room. So it's just the variety and being able to help people and interact with people. And that's why we got into this job, is to make a difference. And that's what I try to do at the school. Make it a safe place for staff and students.
I think a lot of students are really looking to this in this video, but Tanya, what does the career outlook look like?
Well, now is a changing time for law enforcement. We have a lot of retirements taking place in the next few years, and so there really are a lot of opportunity for. There really is a lot of opportunity for those interested in law enforcement. That being said, there's quite a candidate pool as well. There's a lot of different universities and colleges that offer the opportunity for law enforcement, and it is something that people are interested in, so the competition can be very stiff.
Matt said there's many different opportunities in the departments. Like, how many jobs per department would you say there is?
Well, each department is different. I can kind of speak from experience with Maple Grove. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, when people get into this job, they start out as a patrol officer. And I think that's what the public sees is, oh, you're a Maple Grove police officer. Well, that's really your only role, which isn't true. We have opportunities in investigations. You can be a full-time investigator, or you can be a school liaison officer like myself. We also have a drug task force officer, someone who works undercover specifically with narcotics. We also have a street crimes unit. We have a DARE unit. We have a SWAT team. We have a CPO position, a community policing division that deals with some of our retail crimes that we have. So many different opportunities rather than just a patrol officer. So, and each city is different.
All right. That wraps up our career exploration of law enforcement. I'd like to thank Tanya and Matt for joining us. If you would like to see their high school classes they suggest for you to take, click the link to see part 1. Thank you for joining us today, and have a good day.